hate the big, beautiful bill.
So beautiful, so beautiful.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Experian with you guys. So lots of news for you guys today. I tried to make a pledge to myself before I appeared on Piers Morgan this morning, not to yell, and I delivered, and so I feel good about that. I don't know that I've made that pledge for this show, but it'd be nice.
It would be nice, Cenk. It would be nice.
Yeah. And so we have the usual foreign policy news that's always enraging, of course, but we also have domestic policy. Huge news on the tax bill, the budget bill. Definitely not calling it the big beautiful. It's not, there's nothing beautiful about that bill. And we're going to show you how deeply unpopular it is and why it's so unpopular. So let's get started.
In fact, why don't we begin with that story? Because there's some dissent within the Republican Party about whether or not this is the right bill to pass. Let's get into it.
How do Americans feel about the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, if we're talking about adjectives, how about they think it's awful, they think it's horrible, and to quote our colleague Charles Barkley, terrible, terrible, terrible.
Well, some Senate Republicans actually happen to agree that the bill in its current form is terrible, terrible, terrible. And the Senate Republicans are in a race against the clock to pass this wildly unpopular One Big Beautiful Bill Act before Donald Trump's self-imposed July 4th deadline. At least 2 Republicans are holding out and many more are uncertain whether they'll even back the bill. So it's not even clear if they'll be able to meet that deadline or at least send the legislation back to the House in time to meet that deadline. Now, compared to the House version of the bill, which was bad enough, the Senate version adds even more to the national debt and also robs more Americans of healthcare. So just to give you the exact numbers we're talking about here, the Congressional Budget Office estimates the Senate bill would increase the deficit by nearly $3.3 trillion from 2025 to 2024, a nearly $1 trillion increase over the House passed bill, which CBO has projected would add $2.4 trillion to the debt over a decade. Now, the analysis also found that 11.8 million Americans would become uninsured by 2034 if the bill passed, a roughly 1 million person increase over the scoring for the House version of the bill. So in other words, the Senate took a bad bill and they're like, how can we make this even worse for the country? How can we target vulnerable Americans even more? How can we add more to the debt? And then they're gonna send it back to the House. Although, to be fair, it hasn't passed in the Senate quite yet. So here's a breakdown of the components of the bill that will in fact increase the national debt over the next 10 years. So these are the provisions that are the most costly. And as you can see at the very top of that list is the extension of Donald Trump's 2017 tax cuts, which disproportionately benefit the wealthiest among us. That's gonna cost us about $2.2 trillion over the next 10 years. Then you have some more costly provisions, including the fact that they want to essentially add $158 billion in defense spending. And also just quickly notice that when it comes to no tax on overtime or no tax on tips, those provisions are set to sunset or expire by the end of 2028. The tax cuts that disproportionately benefit businesses, for instance, you see that for $564.6 billion, or the extension of the Trump era tax cuts, those are not set to expire based on how the bill is currently written. And then how are they gonna pay for it? Well, they're not, okay? Because the provisions that would save money do harm the neediest among us, but they don't even come close to paying for the bill. Let's just take a quick look at the next graphic here. As you can see, they're expecting to cut $1.1 trillion from Medicaid in the Senate version of the bill. They also want to save $2 billion by cutting worker protections for federal workers. Cenk.
Yeah, so let's break this down one by one. And there are actually some good things in the bill, even though overall it's a disaster. So let's bring back up the chart on the things that it costs us. So the first one, as Anna pointed out, is the continuation of the tax cuts. So a majority of that goes to the rich. In fact, half of that goes to the top 1%. So that's a giant number that doesn't need to be there at all. That has nothing to do with balancing the budget. That has nothing to do with cost containment. It adds to the debt directly by giving to the richest people in the country. Now, when you move down the list, increase the third one, increase standard deduction by up to $2,000. That's not that bad, because that goes more to the middle class. The next one, increase child tax credit and link to inflation. That's actually pretty good.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I'm relatively happy with that one. And then you've got, by the way, buried in that border wall and immigration restrictions is $46 billion for Donald Trump's useless wall. So that's just to make him happy, even though that really doesn't have anything to do with it. We got the border under control without any wall, right? So you actually, even if you give Trump credit for what he's done so far, which I don't mind doing in terms of the border itself, he did that without a wall. So he doesn't need the $46 billion. Okay, but now keep going. So no tax on tips, no tax on car loan interest, no tax on overtime. Not bad, not bad. Okay, those are the more middle class ones. Okay, but you see what they add up to. They add up to about 20% of business tax breaks that got newly added. It's like just $500 billion, more than $500 billion. Oh, the lobbyists came into the Senate and they're like, well, this company wants that and that corporation wants that. And remember all that stuff we did about the tax and the overtime and the tips and stuff? Got tricked MAGA into thinking that was like a huge part of the bill, that was the majority of the tax cuts. You can see it right there in the numbers. It is tiny, tiny, tiny part of the tax cuts. And as Anna explained, they expire. But the ones for the businesses, they are always permanent.
Yes.
And that's what like totally robs our revenue and our government of any ability to sustain itself, and adds tremendously to the debt. So
can I just add one other thing about the tax breaks for businesses? Now, keep in mind that in 2017, when Trump's original version of the tax cut legislation passed, it ensured that the corporate tax rate was lowered from 35% to 21%, and he did not get rid of corporate tax loopholes, meaning that those deductions that corporations take advantage of remain in place. Those corporate tax cuts were permanent in the 2017 bill, meaning these additional tax breaks for businesses come on top of the already lowered corporate tax rate. It's just absurd. It absolutely is absurd.
So here, last one from the where they're adding on provisions. So it's the last one on the list. Savings account for newborns. Don't sleep on that one. That one's actually a really good proposal, originally by Cory Booker, and that actually has its roots in reparations, believe it or not. But they're applying it to all the kids. So it's a way of starting up a savings account for your kids when they're born. I don't know anybody that's opposed to it. That's wonderful. You see credit where credit is due. It's so small. It's $17 billion.
Right.
The other one, that half of which goes to the rich, is $2.2 trillion. And half of which I say go to the rich, and most of it go to the rich. Half of it goes to the top 1%. So 17 billion for the new kids, 1.1 trillion for people making above $500,000. But if that's not enough, they add another $564 billion on for business breaks that didn't exist before. That's why even as they cut Medicaid even more in the Senate version, they still add to the debt more than the House version because they loaded up with pork for all their donors.
Yeah, that's right. Look, if you take these little tiny separate provisions, sure, you can make a case that there are a few good things in the bill. Overall, when you look at the grand scheme of things, this bill is disastrous for the American people and the future of this country, considering how much it's adding to our already massive federal debt of $37 trillion. So for instance, as you can see from what the lawmakers plan to focus most of their savings on, why are they specifically going after Medicaid recipients, the most vulnerable among us? And today the Senate had a vote-a-rama where they voted on a slew of amendments to the bill, including many proposed by Democrats that were of course rejected since they're in the minority. And for Medicare fraudster Rick Scott. And I mean that, in the actual sense of the word. He is a fraudster. He was involved in the biggest Medicare fraud scheme in American history. Well, he looks at that $1.1 trillion being proposed in Medicaid cuts in the Senate and says, no, not enough. I want more cuts. I want them to go deeper. The proposal, by the way, would lower the share of medical bills paid by the federal government for childless adult Medicaid beneficiaries who sign up for the program after 2030, and could cause several states to abandon their Medicaid expansions. So that is the proposal, or I should say the amendment that Rick Scott is proposing here. He wants the cuts to go even deeper. CBO found Scott's amendment would save another $313 billion over 10 years, according to his office. By the way, this is a side note. Today, the Trump administration approved another $510 million in weapons for Israel with no debate whatsoever. That's American taxpayer money funding bombs for a country that's currently carrying out a genocide in Gaza.
How many billions?
Millions, 510 million. Now, that's not in the billions, but that comes on top of the tens of billions of dollars in weaponry that American taxpayers have been funding for Israel since the beginning of this genocide.
Yeah, just real quick.
No debate on that, by the way.
I heard you say that. I wasn't sure what the number was, because if you don't know, over the last 12 months or so, we've given Israel another $30 billion. So the press almost never reports on it. And whenever you hear reports of, how much does Israel get in aid, they always say 3.8 billion. That's the standard that they get every year, without these extra goodies that they throw in every once in a while. 20 million from Biden, 10 billion from Trump, and now another $500 million from Trump. They just keep, like everything else you have to question. Children, we're gonna cut. Medicaid, SNAP, you're hungry, your kid has cancer, cut. Israel, don't even question it, don't even report on it.
There's no debate.
Just no debate, no nothing. If Israel asks, you must give the money, right? Everything else is negotiable.
Right,
and you're telling me that this is America first? Come on, nobody believes that. Unless you're an idiot mainstream media reporter, nobody thinks that Washington puts America first. Everybody knows Congress puts Israel first.
Now, other Republicans in the Senate have tried to get their amendments passed as well, including Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who's considered to be more moderate in the Republican Party. She's actually very concerned about the Medicaid cuts, as are a few other Republican senators, because they look at their states, they look at the high percentage of their own constituents who rely on Medicaid, and they're worried about the political ramifications of cutting Medicaid so deeply. Collins filed an amendment that would double the stabilization fund for rural hospitals to $50 billion and pay for it by adding a 39.6% tax bracket on earners making above or over $25 million. Now, at least 2 Republican senators, Thom Tillis of North Carolina and Rand Paul from the state of Kentucky, have said that they will not vote in favor of this legislation as it currently stands. Just 4 defections, by the way, would be enough to kill this bill. And as of right now, at least half a dozen Republican senators have remained undecided.
Yeah,
I think that most of them are probably going to bow their heads to Donald Trump, who is bullying the Republicans in the Senate currently, because he wants to get this bill passed as soon as possible so he can meet that self-imposed July 4th deadline. Senator John Fetterman, meanwhile, is basically just whining about having to do his job at all. This is a Democrat, by the way, a guy who ran as a progressive, but he's anything but. He told reporters today, "Oh my God, I just want to go home." You know what, why don't you go home and stay home? He continues to say, "I've already missed our entire trip to the beach. I'm going to vote no, there's no drama."
Well, at least he's going to vote no. All right, which is kind of surprising. Maybe that's why they did the Israel thing separate.
Yeah.
So that Fetterman could be like, yes, definitely yes to Israel. Okay, I'm shocked that he votes with Democrats at all on anything.
So final thing, Cenk, as we mentioned earlier, this is a deeply unpopular bill. And Harry Enton was mentioning that early on in the segment. I want you to hear more of what he found through the data. Take a look.
Well, let's take a look at the net favorable rating on the big, beautiful bill. I don't just got one poll for you, Omar. I got 5 of them, and the net favorable rating, minus 19 points, Washington Post, minus 20 points, Pew Research Center, Fox, minus 21, Quinnipiac University, minus 26, KFF, minus 29. The American public at this particular point hate the big, beautiful bill. Trump's policies and your family, help or hurt. The big, beautiful bill, just 23% say help. How about 49%? 49% say hurt. Look, that's a 26-point difference in the direction of hurt. The American people elected Trump to help them and their families, but they see the big, beautiful bill as one that, on the whole, hurts their families.
And you might be thinking, well, I mean, they're probably polling both Democrats and Republicans. Of course, Democrats aren't going to favor this legislation, but let's take a look at Republicans specifically. How do Republican voters feel about this bill? And if you take a look at these polling results, you'll find that a whopping 64% find, I'm sorry, let's go to, okay, so 64% find it unfavorable in total, but if you go to Republicans, 36% find it unfavorable, 61% have a favorable view of the legislation. Now, among Republicans and Republican-leaning independents, among MAGA supporters, 72% find it favorable, but for non-MAGA supporters, 66% find it unfavorable. So Cenk, he might just be focusing on the fact that Republican voters, for the most part, find this bill to be favorable.
Yeah, so let me tell you all the downsides of it and why people don't like it, and then I'll tell you why it's gonna pass and easily, that all of this is fake drama. So even minus 20, even 27% being opposed within MAGA is kind of a giant number. So over a quarter of MAGA saying, no, I hate Donald Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. Well, to be fair, they didn't say hate. They just said they're not in support of it, right? And then to me, the most important line is always the independents. The independents decide the elections, period, right? So you could almost always ignore the Democrats or the Republicans on any given poll. Just look at the independents. So where do they come out? 70 to 27 against. That's a monster number. It's a monster. At minus 43. Minus 43 with independents. So the American people hate this bill. So why do they hate it? I mean, look, all the reasons we just stated, but I'll just tell you two that are glaring. And when you look at the internal of the polling and they break it down by issues, these are in the bottom three for least popular, right? One is the $1.1 trillion tax cut that goes to people making above $500,000 a year, right? So why are we adding over $1 trillion to the debt? For no reason. I mean, do they really desperately need another $1 trillion tax cut? So don't talk to me about balanced budgets if you're gonna give another 1.1 trillion to people making above 500,000. So people look at that and they go, oh, okay, so half of the Trump tax cuts are a giveaway to the top 1%. So that's just unbearable. Okay, but that's terrible and you're adding to the debt. But then when you cut from Medicaid and SNAP, by the way, Trump said he wasn't gonna cut from Medicaid. Total, utter lie. They're butchering Medicaid. So at least 800 billion on the House side, now over 1.1 trillion on Medicaid alone on the Senate side, okay? Because Rick Scott's a guy who didn't rob it enough when I was in private, when I was at a private company. I'd like to rob it now as a senator, right? And so, guys, if they're gonna kick off 12 million people from having health care, they're gonna get sick. They're gonna need that health care, and then they're gonna be enraged. By the way, half of those guys, Trump voters. So I don't know what's going to happen after that. Are the Trump voters gonna go, hey, you know what? My kid didn't need cancer treatment. I'm happy I voted for Trump and these sons of bitch Republicans who took that away? Or are they gonna be super pissed? Because they thought, oh no, Trump daddy's gonna do it to others, not to me, not to me. He's gonna get the bad undocumented guys and the criminals. Oh, he gave a giant tax cut for himself and for all of his donors and took it from me? Okay, my guess is that catches up with you at some point. And I don't wanna hear anything from Josh Hawley. Because Josh Hawley talked a big game.
100%, thank you for bringing him up. Josh Hawley is a fraud, he's a fraud, okay? A lot of tough talk during his Senate hearings where he pretends to be some sort of warrior on behalf of working class Americans, but when push comes to shove, he's gonna do his donors a solid, he's gonna do the business community a solid, he's gonna do wealthy people, the wealthiest among us, a solid, knowing that this legislation is going to kick nearly 12 million Americans off of Medicaid. Medicaid. Like literally the most vulnerable people on the planet are the ones who are going to suffer the most just so the wealthy can get more in tax breaks.
They're literally going to rob the poor to pay the rich.
100%.
Literally.
That's what this bill is, as it stands today.
That's why it's at minus 26, right? But none of that is gonna matter. It's definitely going to pass. So I've been through this movie dozens of times where Republicans like Hawley and Ron Johnson will come out and go, I don't know, man, this is gonna add to the deficit. We better cut more from the poor and the middle class. But they never suggest, hey, maybe we shouldn't give another multi-trillion-dollar tax cut to the rich. Never, because they work for the rich, right? So at the end, you know what they do? They cut every single time. They cut from the poor and the middle class. They pass and they add trillions to the debt, trillions every time, right? And this one will add at least 3.4 trillion to the debt. And then they'll say, oh yeah, later it'll trickle on you from the rich and somehow magically it won't add to the debt. My ass, they're gonna add another giant chunk to the debt because they're robbing you. The Republicans rob you every single time. If you ask me, why am I a Democrat? When I get so frustrated with the Democratic establishment, time and time again, because the only thing Republicans get elected to do is to rob the middle class and the poor to pay their rich donors. That's the whole point of the existence of the Republican Party. If you don't know that, and I know a lot of you don't know that, welcome to the country. Just look at the last 40 years of history. That is literally the only thing they do other than start wars. Okay, so now you can say Trump is different, but this bill's the same goddamn bill that every establishment Republican has ever pushed. It's the same uniparty junk, and it's brought to you by Donald Trump, a wolf in populist sheep clothing.
Well, one Republican senator is pushing back against the bill, so much so that he's decided, I'm not gonna run for re-election because I'm crossing Donald Trump and there are consequences for that. So we'll tell you who the senator is and what he's feuding with Trump about when we come back.
Frack, frack, frack like a duck. Frack, frack, frack.
All right, so we got a poll up on TYT.com. It's about the budget. What do you think will happen to Trump's budget bill? A, it won't pass. B, it'll pass with huge tax cuts and huge deficits. C, it'll pass and have a balanced budget. That's a good one, Jake. Okay, D, it'll pass because they'll take out the tax cuts. I put those last two in just to amuse myself. Okay, so there's zero chance it balances the budget. None, zero, zero, zero. There's 0% chance they take out tax cuts for the rich. That's the whole point, okay? So anyways, vote on that at TYT.com. All right, and by the way, a huge announcement next Monday for Rebellion PAC. We got a new candidate, you're gonna love him. He has an excellent chance to win in a super important state, thoroughly populist, perfect. Okay, so that's next Monday, everybody gets psyched about it. All right, let's go to Super Chat. Homer J. Simpson writes in, do you suppose that they call it the big beautiful bill in some opposition to Build Back Better? Just some way to use BBB? Trump is petty enough, no? You know, I hadn't thought of that, Homer. And it takes a mind like yours to come up with that. No, seriously, maybe. I don't know why it didn't occur to me that, yeah, they're both BBB. Knowing Trump, probably. Okay, he's so silly. I wouldn't put it past him. Anyway, still loading at 36, chairman of Single Life, already super fun name, writes in, Trump slashing Medicaid, GOP cheering, corporate Dems looking away, media calling it a bold reform. In DC, keeping the poor sick isn't a crisis. It's just good business and better ratings. Horrible. I agree with all of that. How come nobody in mainstream media that's so opposed to Donald Trump ever points out Republicans never balance budgets, never, ever, ever. All they do is do tax cuts for the rich, which has created the debt that we have now. How come nobody in mainstream media ever says that clearly? If you want somebody to balance the budget, electing a Republican is the very worst thing you could do, okay? So those are facts. You can do whatever you want with those facts, but they are historic and they're based on the last 40 years. Rage Rock for now says they'll balance the budget in a few years. I'm sure this is just economic de-escalation through escalation. Okay, he's being sarcastic, and that's exactly right. Oh, we had to start the war to end the war. We had to create a giant debt to end the debt. Sure you did. So Sorobin171 writes in YouTube member section, America deserves this epic civics lessons that is coming, every bit of it. I hear you, brother, but nobody ever learns because media just lies to them, and then the Republicans say they're going to balance the budget, and people believe them, and they put them into office. Athena Onken says, I love all the shows. You help keep me sane in these horrible times. I love the fire of Cenk, the salt of Anna, and all of TDR on the watch list. Thank you, Athena. You're awesome. We appreciate you. More YouTube members. Smoke Dest 2 writes in for a lot of folks saying, loving the blazer, Anna.
Thank you.
Okay. Project for Progress writes in, Anna, you change your hair, always beautiful, but I did like the brown better than the straight blonde. Mix looks good too. Is this mix?
Thank you. I haven't had time to do anything with my hair, but look, the last time I went in for my roots, she did make it a little darker. I think she's trying to tell me something. I think she's trying to get me back to my brunette.
Interesting, but it does look mixed. That's a good point. Old Dog Gamer says, I used to avoid this channel because it was too radical, but then I sat back and watched the Dems hand Trump a victory, and suddenly you made sense. Thank you, brother. Thank you for keeping an open mind. Yes, a lot of people are now saying, turns out you guys were the sensible ones. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Well, Republican senator is not going to be seeking re-election because he made the mistake of crossing Trump. Who is it and what's going on here?
What do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there anymore, guys? When the White House senators advising the president are not telling him that the effect of this bill is to break a promise. Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise.
North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis will not be seeking re-election, mostly because of what you just heard him say on the Senate floor. He crossed Daddy Trump, and I guess that's not allowed when you're in the Republican Party. This news comes after the senator essentially pushed back against provisions in Trump's so-called big beautiful bill that would essentially cut Medicaid to the tune of $1.1 trillion. Now, the New York Times reports that Tillis had been privately critical of this provision and even warned his colleagues about the political ramifications of kicking vulnerable Americans off of Medicaid rolls. But over the weekend, he decided to go public and become a lot more overt in regard to his disdain for that provision. And in a post on X, Tillis explained that he has a problem with the changes to Medicaid, saying that I cannot support this bill in its current form. It would result in tens of billions of dollars in lost funding for North Carolina, including our hospitals and rural communities. This will force the state to make painful decisions like eliminating Medicaid coverage for hundreds of thousands in the expansion population and even reducing critical services for those in the traditional Medicaid population. Tillis also notes that there are provisions in the bill that he's on board with. Of course, he loves the tax cuts and more. He says there is a lot for North Carolinians to love about the rest of the one big beautiful bill, including extending the historic Trump tax cuts, increasing the child tax credit, which I personally am in favor for as well, providing historic funding for border security and ending wasteful spending. Now, I just want to be clear, the bill as it stands right now would add to the national debt to the tune of $3.4 trillion, but he does want to try to accomplish all the provisions that he likes without the Medicaid cuts. He says we can and must accomplish this without hurting our rural communities and hospitals and without jeopardizing access to care for hundreds of thousands of North Carolinians who need it the most. Now, Tillis told reporters that he had a nice, friendly, civil chat with Trump about his concerns. He says that this conversation took place on Saturday. I had a very good discussion with President Trump last night. I told him at that point that I had problems with the Medicaid implementation. And I said the House bill, I think, would be a good mark. By the way, the House bill, of course, also cuts Medicaid. It's just that it cuts Medicaid a little less than the Senate version. He says, I do believe the president is really focused on getting the tax portion of the bill done, and I support that, full stop. But it has evolved from a tax bill to one that includes healthcare and other things. And I said that in non-tax areas, we have a problem. Now, in return of saying that he had a pleasant conversation with Trump, Trump basically rewarded him by threatening him with primary challengers. He writes on Truth Social, numerous people have come forward wanting to run in the primary against Thom Tillis. I will be meeting with them over the coming weeks, looking for someone who will properly represent the great people of North Carolina and, so importantly, the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And literally the next day, Tillis announced that he will not be seeking re-election in 2026. Cenk.
Yeah. So first of all, you know a Republican senator is retiring when he wears a Native American bolo tie. Okay, that's his and a T-shirt. Okay, that's him saying sayonara, guys. Now he's more of a traditional Republican, so don't give him too much credit. I'll come back to that in a second. First, some fun polls for you guys on TYT.com. What do you think will happen to Trump's budget bill? A, it won't pass. B, it'll pass with huge tax cuts and huge deficits. C, it'll pass and have a balanced budget. Laugh along with me. D, it'll pass because they'll take out the tax cuts. Laugh along with me. Okay, so that's on TYT.com. Curious what you guys think about that. During the live chat, we also have a poll up in the live chat. Is Thom Tillis leaving the Senate good for Democrats or Republicans or no one? It's clearly good for Democrats, in my opinion, but there's a asterisk in there because it's a Republican-held seat. North Carolina is a purple state at this point. Thom Tillis being considered and labeled by mainstream media as more moderate has a better chance of holding that seat. They'll probably pick a radical in their primary and then have an excellent chance of losing it. But even if they don't pick a radical, they still stand a pretty good chance of losing that seat once you remove the incumbent. So that definitely helps the Democrats. Now back to the Republicans. I don't mind Trump doing these primaries. And this one is actually a perfectly legitimate one because normally he does it if he feels offended for whatever reason personally. Like, oh, that guy said something about my hair or my orange tan. That's it, primary him, right? Or the slightest little provocation. No, this is him trying to pass his bill and saying, if you don't vote for my bill, I'm gonna primary you. That is normal politics. Democrats should do that a lot more often on their side, okay? So I don't begrudge him that. That none of those are the issue. What's the issue is what's in the bill, right? So you could tell that Thom Tillis is no, angel either. He says, "Oh, I only want 800 billion in Medicaid cuts, not 1.1 trillion in Medicaid cuts. The 800 billion is already disastrous.
It is, yeah.
Would have already kicked off 10 million from having health care instead of 12 million Americans, right? It's still a terrible disaster. And what does he say? Just like Ron Johnson, just like Rand Paul, okay, they always say the same thing. I mean, the tax cuts for the rich. I would definitely keep the tax cuts for the rich, okay? The tax cuts are the most important thing. But brother, if we did it your way, the bill would add even more to the debt, right? So because you keep the tax cuts, you don't have as many spending cuts. Good, I don't want those particular spending cuts. By the way, notice in all of this, nobody's cutting almost any corporate subsidies. They cut from renewable energies because they have the giant amount that the big oil gives them. And plus they got a grudge against anything that's renewable or goes to the future. They always want to go backwards, right? But outside of that, 17 billion in oil subsidies, 150 billion more to defense contractors, and 34 billion in Golden Dome, and adding corporate pork on top of corporate pork. Thom Tillis doesn't mind any of that. Josh Hawley doesn't mind any of that. None of the Republicans mind any of that. So what's going to happen at the end? It doesn't. All these objections are junk. It's all theater.
It is all theater.
I've seen it play out so many. Every time a Republican president gets into office, we have this fake theater, and at the end, they pass a bill with giant tax cuts for the rich that cuts from the poor and the middle class, and at the end adds $2 to $8 trillion to the debt. In this case, it looks like it's going to be around 3 to 4 trillion.
So I actually want to tie this story and the fact that you're literally robbing from the poor to give to the rich, and how this is the type of behavior in Congress that leads to a constituency that is a little more open-minded to someone like Zohran Mamdani, right? Someone who comes out, identifies as a democratic socialist, and talks about, policies that seem radical to, politicians in Congress. But to the American people, it's like, all right, well, we've been dealing with neoliberalism for how long? Okay, nothing's trickling down on us. They keep robbing from us. Taxpayers see their resources go toward endless wars in the Middle East, endless weapons to Israel with no debate whatsoever, right? We're talking about tens of billions of dollars. And in the meantime, Congress is nickel and diming the American people, especially the most vulnerable among us. So if you don't understand the rise of a candidate like Mamdani, this is at the heart of it. This economic dysfunction and this ever-growing gap between the rich and the poor in this country.
Yeah, so I was on Piers Morning this morning, and Piers made an interesting point about how Mamdani is almost like a Democratic Trump. And the reason he said that is not as a negative thing, but as change. Whatever we got to do, we are voting change, right? So the Republicans voted change and enough independents to go with Trump, right? Now this is Democrats in the largest city in the country going, we've had enough. We know Cuomo's not gonna change anything. I don't know if these exact policies are gonna work, but I'll take it over the status quo any day. And that's what now both sides are screaming. We can't stand the status quo. The only people who still like it is every politician and every media figure in Washington, D.C.
Well, one person who's not happy with this bill still is Elon Musk, and apparently that feud between Musk and Trump was reignited over the weekend.
I don't want windmills destroying our place. I don't want, these solar things where they go for miles and they cover up a half a mountain that are ugly as hell. And by the way, the panels are all made, and the windmills, they're all made in China.
Well, Trump has not changed his mind on renewable energy, and the president apparently has requested that Senate Republicans target renewable energy subsidies in their mega bill. Now, this has provoked Elon Musk to essentially reignite his very public feud with the president. So let's get into it. Now, we should first talk about what the bill is targeting in particular that has upset Elon Musk, because last Friday, Politico reported that President Donald Trump is urging Senate Majority Leader John Thune to crack down on tax credits, specifically for wind and solar energy, as part of the so-called big beautiful bill, that mega bill, that omnibus bill. Now, it looks like Thune is delivering for Trump, with Barron's reporting this morning that the bill would phase out tax credits for large-scale wind and solar projects by the end of 2027, earlier than in previous versions. Projects must now be in service by December 31st, 2027 to qualify. Now, the Senate bill also phases out tax credits for residential solar projects, as it did in the House version of the bill. But Senate Republicans went even further by adding, get a load of this, a tax on wind and solar energy. So how would that work? Well, the tax would apply to wind and solar projects completed after 2027 if they use a certain percentage of components from China, the industry's primary supplier of everything from critical minerals to batteries. Other forms of renewable energy, such as geothermal, hydropower, and nuclear, are not targeted by the bill. So as you can imagine, Elon Musk is super salty about this. He's been a longtime advocate of renewable energy, and now he's slamming the tax on wind and solar energy, posting on X that the latest Senate draft bill will destroy millions of jobs in America and cause immense strategic harm to our country. Utterly insane and destructive. It gives handouts to industries of the past while severely damaging industries of the future. Now, clearly he has his own personal conflict of interest here, but I think he's right in what he's pointing at. He also says, in response to a post saying by 2030, China could have the ability to produce enough solar and storage infrastructure each year to match the entire electricity generation capacity of the United States. Elon Musk quote tweets that and says, yes, the massive strategic error is being made right now to damage solar/battery that will leave America extremely vulnerable in the future. And he also replied, or I should say, he replied to this post by Ron Wyden, showing that Republicans are basically going to cut $930 billion in Medicaid in order to pay for major tax breaks for corporations. And he is, by the way, retweeting Thomas Massey, who says BBB, meaning big beautiful bill, equals our credit rating if this bill becomes law. Again, Musk retweeted that. I thought that was kind of clever. And he's threatening to essentially form a new political party to go after anyone who votes in favor of this legislation. He also says it is obvious with the insane spending of this bill, which increases the debt ceiling by a record $5 trillion, that we live in a one-party country, the Porky Pig Party. Time for a new political party that actually cares about the people. I would venture to say that Elon Musk is not an authority on who cares about the people of this country, but nonetheless, point taken about how this bill is a disaster for the American people.
Okay, so we're asking the poll in the live chat, is it time for a new political party to be formed? Okay, curious about your answers there. So now, they're both right and they're both wrong about Elon Musk and Donald Trump. So what are they right and wrong about? So is Elon Musk right that this bill is a disaster? Yes, absolutely. Is he right that it makes no sense to take subsidies away from a nascent industry that needs it to set up infrastructure and to give it to an industry that's been around for 110 years, is the most profitable industry in the world and doesn't need any subsidies at all? Yeah, of course he's right about that. I mean, even if you don't agree that we should give subsidies to solar or wind or Tesla, right? Why are we giving 17 billion in subsidies to oil and gas? You literally have to pay for that. And by the way, just Ro Khanna did this bill where you could actually cut 12 trillion from the deficit, 12 trillion. And you don't lose anything. It's amazing. You think it's like magic, because it's not magic. You just stop giving everything to corporations, right? And so a friend of mine who was a traditional Republican watched that interview. He's like, I don't get it. That makes perfect sense. Why don't they do that? And among the many, many savings, and once you take out corporate subsidies and giveaways, is the oil one, oil and gas one. It's just, but isn't it interesting that other than Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders, there's no Democrat that makes a big deal out of it? Like, why isn't leadership going, why are you giving this 17 billion away? Like, that's like more than 4 times the amount of money we normally give to Israel in any given year.
What leadership are you talking about? Are you talking about Hakeem Jeffries?
Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer.
I mean, they're both totally asleep.
No, they
put me to sleep.
Yeah, and the reason for that is, and you know, these donors complaining about, oh my God, I don't know about Kamala Harris in California. We did that story on Friday. Oh my God, Joe Biden lied to me. No, guys, Democratic donors, you pick empty vessels on purpose so that they will follow your orders. So then don't be surprised when Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are all empty vessels. That's why you chose them. If anyone has any interesting ideas, you go, oh, I'm not funding that. No, change, no way, I'm at the top, I don't want any change. That's why you have these loser Democratic leaders, because the donors picked them to be losers. So anyway, they love that these tax cuts for the rich are gonna pass. They're like, oh, golly gee, are they gonna pass again? Like they do every single time? Oh, when we get in, oh, there's nothing we can pass. The mighty parliamentarian has defeated all of our bills. Oh, the Republicans are right now, they're gonna pass everything, and there's nothing we could do, okay? So anyways, so Elon is right, there's no need for the oil and gas subsidies and coal. What are we doing with coal, right? But then Trump is right that Elon just wants his own subsidies and is super mad about it, right? So, and give Trump a little bit of credit for at least not listening to that donor. And that was his top donor at over $300 million, right? So a fair show in America. Now, having said that, they're both wrong. This is a giant disaster of a bill with all the corporate giveaways and all the giveaways for the rich. So would Elon change the bill so that it doesn't give away 1.1 trillion to people making above $500,000?
Of course not.
No way. Would he change it so that you end the $562 billion in corporate pork that's stuffed in there for no reason? Maybe if it's against some industries that compete against him, like oil and gas. But other than that, he's like, oh, I want the goodies, I want the goodies. So he's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He's like, I paid for my subsidies, not for their subsidies, and now I'm getting stiffed. Well, welcome to Donald Trump's career. That's what he always does. So they're both wrong. This bill sucks, and Elon Musk wouldn't make it any better. But I like that he's criticizing it, because the things he's saying about the downsides of the bill are true.
Agreed. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into some foreign policy, including yet another weapons package that's been approved for Israel. We'll talk about what's happening in Gaza. Don't miss it. We'll be back with those stories and more.
They'll go back to destroying our country and go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. By the way, I'm a big fan of solar.
All right, this is the end of the month, so don't forget our rebellion candidates, Richard Ojeda, North Carolina, obviously Ro Khanna is an incumbent, and Randy Bryson, Wisconsin. Go help them out if you can. We got an awesome Senate candidate coming up next week. We're gonna announce it right here on the Young Turks on Monday. Tonight, Alex Thompson, the guy who wrote the book with Jake Tapper about how they found out that Biden's old. So he's gonna be on the show. That's gonna be fascinating. So don't miss that. That's at 8 o'clock instead of the bonus episode today. On shoptyt.com, they got a lot of fun designs. They got the look up design that I had on the other day. Don't look for your problems. Don't look down. Don't look to the left. Don't look right. Look up. Look up. It's the donor class. And also on there, of course, for 4th of July is hot dog is my favorite meat. And if I'm definitely wearing this on 4th of July. If you're not wearing this on 4th of July, I don't know what are you really an American? I don't know. ShopTYT.com.
So funny.
Okay, so make sure you get that in a panic. Speaking of things in a panic, on Wednesday, we're doing an Operation Hope chat right here, bonus episode, and then I come on, or I stay here and I do the Operation Hope with all you guys. Join. You could ask me questions. You could give ideas. It's really important that we get as many people as we can participating in Operation Hope. So that's Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern after the bonus episode for the members. And of course, check out our podcasting network wherever you get it. Okay, Sassy Dragon writes in, Anna, you look so beautiful. I love that color on you so much.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
That was so good, Bart.
Lots of that today. Yeah, I'll go down to Steele Farnsworth in the YouTube member section. Anna's hair is looking extra fire today.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe it's how the hair and the jacket are interplaying. Okay, I'm so tired of that topic. All right, let's keep going.
I literally went out and looked for a jacket with this color because I have green eyes and apparently it brings out green eyes. What do you think? Do my eyes look green?
I don't know, they always look green, I can't tell. Okay. All right, Just Jim writes in, better watch your back, Cenk. Trump's Justice Department issued a directive to strip naturalized Americans of citizenship for criminal offenses. Look, I know they're gonna do stupid crap like that. So that goes too far, they won't get that one through.
No, not just criminal offenses, for criticizing Israel.
Yeah, I know, of course. But look, the more he goes in that direction, the more unpopular he becomes. I know some don't believe it, but Rogan and all the bros are like, no, don't take away people's citizenship, you dumbass. Nobody voted for that, and it makes a difference in the polling, okay? Michael Epen says, beautiful blazer, and then puts in brackets, Anna's, of course.
So beautiful.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it, Michael. No, you're right, you're right. Next TYT reporter says, it's not just the money's going to Israel, they immediately vote for it. That money also goes to the weapons manufacturers and those are their donors. Both are donors, that's exactly right. Bonks writes in the YouTube member section, I feel a little jaded today. I say we just rack up as much debt as it takes for things to crash out. No, don't do that. No, it's a really bad idea. Kevin Shea says, who'd ever thought that I would be in a place, or we would be in a place where the president wears a ton of makeup every day and the VP eyeliner every day, yet both are against drag queens.
Good point, good point.
Funny, Kevin, I like it. David Rodriguez says, I live in North Carolina, there are a bunch of old people over here, they're gonna be pissed. LL Taco Dragon says, I live in North Carolina, good riddance, Thom Tillis. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and DJ Payne. Something we might all be in if this bill passes. All right, DJ Payne, thanks for hitting that beautiful join button, that big, beautiful join button underneath the video. Okay. You know, tyt.com/join. Also beautiful.
So beautiful.
Sounds like a New Yorker there. All right.
You know what's not beautiful? This.
Israel's latest airstrikes in Gaza have caused multiple casualties. Some of the dead were from one family, killed in an encampment for the displaced in the Al-Mawasi area. Children were also among the victims.
They bombed us while we are sleeping on the ground. We didn't do anything wrong. 2 of my children have died, and the rest are in intensive care. There's no flour, no supplies, no food or water. We are moving from one place to another. What have we done to deserve this?
Well, as the carnage against Palestinians in Gaza continues, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced another round of evacuations in northern Gaza in order to carry out a new offensive, of course, as this genocide continues. So it's all likely because he wants to continue postponing his corruption trial. And unfortunately, the courts in Israel have granted him another 1-week postponement. Now, his tactic, again, has worked for now. Let's watch.
Benjamin Netanyahu will be convening his security cabinet. He was supposed to be in court this week on the stand in a long-running, often delayed corruption trial. He's accused of charges including bribery and fraud. He denies them all. Judges agreed he could be excused on diplomatic and security grounds for now. Israeli officials are heading to the White House today for talks on Gaza and Iran. President Trump has called on Israel to, quote, make the deal in Gaza.
Well, the postponement for now is just a technical thing. Netanyahu, the trial after 5 years is at a stage where Netanyahu has taken the stand and he's now answering the questions of the prosecution. So it's an uncomfortable stage of the trial for him. But he's already in that stage, and the postponement now is just a week after the judges have been convinced by the heads of Israeli security branches that there's something very important that the prime minister needs to deal with, and therefore they have to wait until they resume the trial.
Yeah, well, the courts need to stop giving him postponements, because if he's going to continue using the genocide that he's carrying out in Gaza as an excuse to continue postponing his corruption trial, he's going to keep the genocide going. And that's what has been happening since the very beginning of this war. Massacres of Palestinians at the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces have been ramped up in recent days. In fact, just today, at least 60 people across Gaza were killed in heavy Israeli attacks. A journalist was among those who were killed in Gaza City specifically. The Gaza Health Ministry also says that at least 81 Palestinians have been killed and more than 400 injured in Israeli strikes across Gaza in the 24 hours until midday on Saturday. In one incident, at least 11 people, including children, of course, were killed after a strike near a stadium in Gaza City. Al-Shifa hospital staff and witnesses told news agencies the stadium was being used to house displaced people living in tents. So the IDF continues bombing, literally like these tent encampments because Palestinians have been displaced. Nearly every single residential building has been bombed. It's a complete and utter disaster. And on one hand, you have Trump claiming, I want a ceasefire deal, ceasefire now. Well, why did you approve another weapons package for Israel to the tune of $510 million? And I can get into the details about those weapons in just a moment, but you can't on one hand call for an end to the war and then on the other hand continue rewarding Israel with endless weaponry, paid for by US taxpayers, by the way.
Yeah, that's because he's negotiating with the donor class. He's saying, look, I made him stop attacking Iran. Okay, then I'll give you something in return. I'll give you $500 million in war. But wait, why do we have to give them anything? They're taking money from us. They're asking for help. They're asking to drive us into war. What do we get back? And the answer is always absolutely nothing. Nothing but grief and enemies and a stain on our nation's history for financing a genocide. But Trump's negotiating But who's he negotiating with? He's already the president of the United States. Apparently there are people that are more powerful than the president. That's why Trump's like, okay. I'm so sorry for making you stop bombing Iran. Here's a $500 million gift, right?
Yeah.
Etc. Okay, so now you're saying, all right, look, I get it. Gaza's a slaughterhouse. Israel's killing people almost for sport now. We reported last week about how they're playing Squid Games, an Israeli version of red light, green light. And the operation is named after it. It's called Salted Fish, and the operation is Operation Salted Fish. Okay, so it's now just like beyond disgusting. Everyone that keeps killing in Gaza are going to go straight to a museum one day. They're all going to be in some sort of genocide remembrance museum. I hope 100%. To God one day Smotrich and Ben Gvir, let alone Netanyahu, are arrested. So we'll come back to that. But I want to talk about Smotrich because it's critical to what you're seeing today. If you're saying, yeah, I got it. It's like they do bombing all the time. But why bombing northern Gaza again? Because they're trying to drive people into the south. Why are they trying to drive them to the south? Well, that brings me to this quote from Smotrich from the Times of Israel. Within a few months, Smotrich says, we will be able to declare that we have won. Gaza will be totally destroyed. And he says, in another 6 months, Hamas won't exist as a functioning entity. Oh, good, then you have no reason to be there, right? No, he continues, the population of Gaza will be concentrated from the Morag corridor southwards. The rest of the strip will be empty. He then adds, the Gazan citizens will be concentrated in the south. They'll be totally despairing, understanding there is no hope and nothing to look for in Gaza, and will be looking for relocation to begin a new life in other places.
This is the country, by the way, that has a clandestine nuclear weapons program. They have nuclear weapons. They're not part of the non-proliferation agreement. They are currently engaged in genociding Palestinians in Gaza. They plan on annexing the entirety of the West Bank, a territory that belongs to the Palestinian people. And they have the audacity to talk about what a threat Iran is when Iran has shown on multiple occasions a level of restraint that blows my mind. Okay, Israel bombs the Iranian embassy in Syria. How does Iran respond? They wait a few days and then they hit up Trump, they hit up the Israeli government, and they let them know we're gonna do a theater, essentially, make it appear like we're retaliating, but here's where the missiles are gonna go, so you can strike them down. Okay, you have the United States, doing Israel's dirty work in bombing Iran nuclear facilities. And how does Iran respond? Okay, we're gonna retaliate, but it's all gonna be pretend. We're gonna target these US bases in the Middle East, but we're gonna warn you ahead of time so no one gets hurt, so we can at least make it appear as though we're retaliating for our people. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm getting really tired of hearing about how the genocidal country of Israel is the good country, the moral country, the country that should have illegal, nuclear weapons that they don't even acknowledge. And the ones that we should worry about the most are the Iranians because they do chants that we don't like. Get out of here.
Look, you could
get out of here.
You could deny this if you're an Israel supporter, but I don't even think Israel supporters would overly deny it.
Israel's a threat, okay? The real threat.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
The country most likely to use a nuke is overwhelmingly Israel.
100%.
Because look, the reason why I say a lot of Israel supporters would also agree is, my God, if they're slightly in danger, they're gonna press that button so quick, okay? I mean, you know it. Look, Iran is in danger all the time, constantly bombed by Israel, America, etc. So many other countries that are in danger and they don't use those. Now, Iran doesn't have nukes, so they couldn't use them anyway, right? But the minute Israel gets jittery, they're gonna press that button. By far the most likely to use it because they have a population and a government that is deeply, deeply paranoid. They think the whole world hates them and they have to attack first before anyone even thinks about attacking them.
The whole world does hate them.
But because of this genocide.
Because of this.
Right.
Okay, like I'm so, how are you gonna put yourself in the position of like poor little victims when they're slaughtering tens of thousands of innocent people, not feeling any remorse about it whatsoever? You literally have people in the Israeli government who don't believe there's a single innocent person in Gaza.
Yeah.
They think they're all violent, dangerous terrorists. But honestly, who are the terrorists here? When you're just slaughtering all these children willy-nilly. Haaretz reported today, 17,000 children slaughtered in Gaza so far.
Yeah, no, there's no question. The Israeli government is definitely more dangerous. It's, by the way, also more religious nut jobs. Like, part of the reason I hate the Iranian regime is because they're fundamentalist nut jobs, right? But are they crazier than Smotrich and Ben-Gvir? No way, no way. Because Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are proven genocidal religious maniacs. Whereas we're worried that the Ayatollah is someone who could commit a lot of violence and is a religious maniac, right? But okay, so by the way, one of our members made a really good point last week. They said, so let me get this right. In this ceasefire negotiations, Iran is asking that Israel also stop attacking Gaza. That's their #1 ask.
Yeah.
So they're asking on behalf of another people. By the way, the Palestinians aren't even Shia like the Iran is. They're Sunni. They're on behalf of a rival sect. They're saying, can you please stop murdering those people? What is Israel asking? That Trump support Bibi Netanyahu in his corruption charges.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, it gives you a sense of morality. I'm not defending the Iranian regime. I'm just showing you how much more despicable the Israeli regime is. And so you can cry about it, and you can do propaganda, but Israel attacked Iran. Israel is the one that has attacked almost all of its neighbors. Iran not only got attacked by Israel, America, they also got attacked by Iraq. Yep. And back then, we were on Iraq's side. And Iraq used biological and chemical weapons on Iran. Iran has been attacked and attacked and attacked while our lying mainstream media and our lying politicians told you Iran is dangerous evil. They're the real problem. That's why we should murder them first, right? Yeah. Stupid warmongers. So now, lastly, back to this story here about how Israel's driving them to the south. So if you're wondering, hey, in most of these stories, Israel's not even, like sometimes they pretend to have targeted a Hamas guy. A lot of times they don't even give almost all the time they never give a name. They're like, yeah, there was some militant in the area. And then they just murder a bunch of children and families. And if you're wondering why, like do they just like killing kids? No, they're bombing the families to drive them to the south so they could finish the Smotrich plan, which is to make life in Gaza so unbearable through murder and starvation that they could push them into the Sinai desert and take all of Gaza for greater Israel. Now that's from the river to the sea, but actually done and executed and planned by our beloved ally, the moral army, okay? No, the disgusting government of Israel that is trying to add ethnic cleansing on top of their daily terrorism against Palestinian civilians and children.
And for Israelis or Israel defenders who want to come at me for working on a show called The Young Turks as if you give a damn about the Armenian people, let's just be abundantly clear about which country supplied the weapons to Azerbaijan to engage in their ethnic cleansing of ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. It was Israel, of course.
Of course.
So please don't even try to come at me as if Israelis give a damn about the Armenian people, because they don't. Israelis care about Israelis. End of story. Let's take a break. We'll be back.
They failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power. We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC
opportunity was an experiment.
If Phil and host beat CNN and headline news combined, at some point they want to give me a show.
Every single year that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
And they want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Magic. It's showtime. And say 45 minutes. I'm hosting today. Now, I know what you're thinking, JR, your face is already perfect, but you know what? I still need to apply some makeup. I went through this process, right, a few years ago, when I realized that I was gonna have to wear makeup on the show. I had to go through, like, finding out what my undertones were. You guys know what those are? I got my MAC Cosmetics. It says SPF 15 foundation, broad spectrum. But apparently what I have is red undertones, and I think pores are not supposed to be seen. I need all these things to be confirmed for me. These sponge things don't work for me. You gotta use your hands. At least I did. That's how the magic really happens. So we're gonna go through a tutorial how to make the magic happen from beautiful to beautifuler. Let's go. I've already been moisturized. That's the first thing. But moisturization already happened. We go raw. All hands. Pick up a couple streaks. This is the guy way of putting on makeup. Look at that, dots. There's some shiny points that generally happen. First of all, here we go. You dust here. I'm putting way too much, but you dust. Oh, get the excess off. You don't want chunky powder. There's like a T-zone, I think, right? Mine is a double T-zone. Because I went middle and another cross. Make sure your nose isn't all shiny. People get on you for it. They'll say, that's not a good point you made on there, JR. Your nose is shiny. You guys are picky like that sometimes. I think that's about it, fellas and ladies. See you guys next time. Bitsies.
You're smoking some of the best dope God ever put breath in. You're Willie Nelson high.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Asan Sheikh, Champagne Kami, which is funny, and Steve Pift. They all hit that big, beautiful join join button underneath the video on YouTube. You can also join through tyt.com/join. And tonight, in a little under an hour, we're going to talk to Alex Thompson, one of the co-author of Jake Tapper's book, or their book together, Original Sin, about the Biden cover-up. That should be a super interesting conversation. That's going to be available to everybody at 8 o'clock Eastern. All right, Anna.
All right, let's get to our next story.
We've been in power for 6 months, and I was so excited in the beginning, thinking there's nothing we can't do, literally nothing we can't do. But 6 months in, there's literally nothing that we can do, and then we ended up bombing a foreign country, and that upset me so much. And I'm allowed to be upset about it. I can stand here and say—
You are allowed?
Well, no, I'm not sure if, not according to Mark Levin and not according to many others, that prioritize another country over our country.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene joined Tucker Carlson to call out the Republican Party in prioritizing Israel's genocide in Gaza over the American people. Now, as a Republican lawmaker, there are some things she can do, including call President Donald Trump out on the fact that he continues sending more and more money in taxpayer funds to Israel for weaponry to carry out slaughter in Gaza. But we'll wait and see if she does that. Now, they covered a lot of topics during this hour-and-a-half long conversation, but focused heavily on Israel, war with Iran, and America First policies. And here she is pointing out just how obsessed Congress really is with the country of Israel, as opposed to, the country that they were elected to represent.
Really, the only issue that all Republicans in the House agree on is that Israel is a priority over the United States. They all agree.
Oh, absolutely, they all agree. Since I've become a member of Congress since 2021, we have voted on 22 resolutions for Israel, 22 of them. All kinds of resolutions, denouncing anti-Semitism, supporting Israel. We voted on 22 of those. It's coming to a point where it's so obvious all the time in everyone's language, the social media posts they put out, the statements that they make. They have to proclaim Israel. They have to proclaim their faith and loyalty in Israel and how they, Israel is our greatest ally. And it's a statement that has to be made over and over and over again, to the point it's becoming like, wait a minute, what about our own country? What about our own people?
Yeah, what about our own people? Because currently Congress is working to nickel and dime the American people by cutting Medicaid. The question is, will it be a little over $800 billion in Medicaid cuts, or will it be $1.1 trillion in Medicaid cuts? In the meantime, the US government, including under Donald Trump in his second term, has sent tens of billions of dollars of US taxpayer money to Israel for weaponry. I mean, God forbid they pay for their own damn weapons for their genocide in Gaza, but American taxpayers have to fund those weapons, right? Where's the outrage about that, Cenk?
Yeah. So this is a super important conversation that they're having. And the reason is the left has been opposed to Israel's aggressive wars, war crimes, and oftentimes the funding of Israel to enable all of those egregious abuses that Israel has. But the problem is that by ourselves, we can't push that boulder up the hill, right? It's a Sisyphean task, right? And the establishment keeps rolling it back super aggressively down the hill. Now, there are some allies on the right. And so you could say, hey, it's not enough. And you could always say that. They're not going to turn on Trump. They didn't magically become liberals overnight, right? Of course not, right? But are they having a real conversation and pushing a lot of right-wing voters to go, hey, wait a minute, why are we funding Israel to no end? Why is Israel so much more important than America? Especially to a right-wing audience, that does not sound good. In fact, it has moved the polling among Republicans. And that is super important because there's no way in the world you could end Israel's influence in this country unless both the right and the left are against it. Because if only one of us are against it, they're gonna overpower us super easily, okay? Because the donor class runs everything in this country. As we've told you a million times, drug companies, oil companies, etc., are even more powerful. So, but in order to beat back any kind of lobby with that kind of power, we have to unite. So that's partly what's happening here. And if you say, yes, but Marjorie Taylor Greene's full of crap, she hasn't done anything. That's actually not true. So there was a boycott bill that came up in the Congress, in the House. It was yet another one of these bills that if any American citizen or business dares to boycott Israel, that the American government will have severe punishment of that person. And she's like, no. And she led a revolt among the Republicans against it and killed that bill. So we're starting to make progress. They're starting to notice, yeah, this special ally hasn't given us anything. all they ever do is take and get us into wars.
So let's talk about why that even is the issue here. How could it be that a foreign government is able to take so much from the American people and the American people get nothing in return other than hostility from other Arab countries, Muslim majority countries? Well, the answer to that is AIPAC. So they talk about AIPAC, they talk about the lobbying group essentially driving Congress's obsession with supporting and providing cover for Israel at all costs. And Greene even revealed how AIPAC pounces on newly elected leaders immediately and argued that they should be registered as foreign agents. Let's take a look.
Everyone's freshman year, AIPAC will take Republicans and Democrats, new members, on a special trip to Israel.
Do they pay for it?
I don't know. I don't know because they didn't take me. I think any special interest group, if they are representing another country, a foreign country, they have to register that way.
Under the Foreign Agent Registration Act, FARA.
We have a law. Yes, they should register under that law.
Why aren't they registered under FARA? I don't understand that.
I think everybody's too afraid to push that issue.
Why?
Tucker, I have no idea. Because I think it's because it's such a strong group that will come against you. They will come against you. They will fund a primary against you. I'll probably get a primary funded against me for even saying this on this show. But you know what? I don't care.
I mean, look, Tucker knows. I mean, Tucker is kind of playing dumb there, but he knows exactly why there isn't this push to get AIPAC to register as, a foreign lobbying group. And that's because anyone who is critical of anything even loosely associated with Israel is immediately smeared as an anti-Semite. If you are a politician, you're going to deal with AIPAC essentially funding a primary candidate, someone who's going to primary you. They're vicious. If you are an outspoken political commentator, they're gonna come at you with all sorts of smears, arguing that you're anti-Semitic for not supporting the government of Israel, which in no way is representative of Jewish people. It's representative of a horrific government that carries out atrocities on a regular basis with the cover of the United States government. So look, you're right, Shank. This is the first time in my life that I've witnessed or seen some Republican politicians and Republican commentators speak out against our toxic relationship with Israel. I don't know if it's gonna be enough at this moment to stop the ongoing genocide in Gaza, the annexation of the West Bank, and honestly, this effort to get the United States to fight a regime change war in Iran on behalf of Israel. There's more and more saber rattling happening as we speak. So I'm worried about that as well. We'll get to Iran in just a second, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think we're at such an interesting moment in American politics. And I kind of feel bad for people who are ensconced in their bubbles and don't see outside of them. So Ezra Klein, just today or yesterday, said that, hey, don't conflate anti-Zionism or critiques of Israel like Mamdani is doing with anti-Semitism. He's like, that's a disaster for us Jews because the government of Israel is a government and it's doing terrible things. We don't want that on all Jews. Stop saying that anyone criticizing Israel is attacking Jews. You're conflating the two. So Ezra Klein is agreeing with Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And if you don't find that interesting, that's weird, right? Like what? So the only way you don't find that interesting is no, I'm gonna choose to hate these people and I'm not gonna listen, right? So, okay, so in this case, what happened to the Republican voters? For the young Republican voters, and this is under 50, so under 50 is not that young, okay? So it's a big, okay, but it's a big chunk of Republican voters. Support for Israel has gone down by 15 points since 2022. That's a giant number for the entire country, for the entire Republican Party. So now they're underwater. 50% oppose under 50-year-old Republicans. 50% oppose, 48% support, okay? So now when you take those guys, you combine them with the independents that they already lost and the left that they already lost, for the first time ever, there's at least a chance that the Israeli lobby can be matched by this coalition that is beginning to wake up and realize this is not at all in America's interests.
By the way, just to further answer Tucker's question from that last video, the majority of those trips to Israel, they're sponsored by AIPAC's charitable affiliate, the American Israel Education Foundation, which allows it to legally get around a 2007 law that limits lobbyists' direct involvement in most privately sponsored travel. And The Intercept reported a few years ago in 2023 that AIEF got millions of dollars from 8 philanthropic groups, estates, and family foundations. Now let's move on to Iran. So they also talked about the conflict with Iran, and here's Greene revealing how overjoyed her colleagues in Congress were to get involved in yet another war in the Middle East.
It's sick that America is cheering that we bombed another country. Now, okay, let's look at that. Yes, Iran is that they sponsor terrorism. They have killed our military, but our military never belonged over in the Middle East in the first place. Of course. I'll argue that all day long. But however, when people that hold power in Washington, D.C., like I do, but everyone I work with is just over the top excited that we may be going to war to kill people, they never think about the innocent people, or they don't care about the innocent people.
It makes them feel powerful.
Yeah, in fact, Senator Lindsey Graham in a piece for the Wall Street Journal today was bragging about how he made all the difference in persuading President Donald Trump to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, would he ever fight in a regime change war in Iran? Of course not. Would he send a young family member of his to Iran to fight that war? Unlikely. But hey, the defense contractors are paying him buku bucks to keep cheerleading for endless regime change wars in the Middle East, especially on behalf of Israel, and he's gonna deliver and feel real proud about it. Lindsey Graham is a piece of crap. Go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, so I watched that whole interaction. I was stunned by it because my whole life I'm used to Republicans cheerleading for war and violence. So like, oh, here at home, oh, the mass shootings. No, it's not the guns. Everybody should be armed. Everybody should have an assault rifle. Abroad, oh, Iraq war is great. Vietnam war is great. All the wars are great. Wars are awesome, right? Very militaristic, very pro-violence. Tucker and Marjorie Taylor Greene went on for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes going, violence is terrible. Why would anybody be in favor of violence? We abhor violence. It's for the weak, Tucker kept saying. It's for the weak. And I'm like, wow. I mean, look, I'm the guy who said they will turn, and they'll turn specifically about Israel. I mean, you're seeing it with your own eyes, right? But even I didn't expect that they would do like an ode to nonviolence in the way that they are. And for Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican, to say, but Iran killed some of our troops, but our military never belonged there in the first place. Wow, a Republican saying that in my lifetime. I can't believe it, right? So that is totally real. That is going to all of Tucker's audience, all of Marjorie Taylor Greene's audience, and they're telling them war is not the answer. That's a beautiful thing. We could disagree on everything else, but they're on the right track here.
Now, in the same conversation, she also called out Israel in trying to drag the United States into a regime change war with Iran. So I commend her for saying that and saying it out loud, saying it publicly. But here's my issue with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She still backs Trump 100%. And that's an issue because Trump isn't America first. Trump has prioritized Israel by sending tens of billions of our tax dollars to that country so they can buy weapons from our weapons manufacturers. So these weapons manufacturers become wealthier through taxpayer money. It's a redistribution of wealth from the bottom, from working class Americans to defense contractors, so Israel can carry out its genocide in Gaza while cheerleading for a regime change war that the United States would fight on their behalf. It's disgusting. So you can't say you're 100% behind Trump when he is the leader that is enabling the very thing that you say you're against.
Yeah, so look, that's why we're better than them. And I say that as as something that's factual. I don't mean our opinions are better or that we're better people. But if you're talking about honesty, we call out our own side all the time. At least the Young Turks does, right? We called out Biden for being too old. We said he shouldn't run. We said they should do a primary. We've called out the establishment on the Democratic side 1 billion times over. And so when you get to the Republicans, but to be fair to a lot of Democrats too, they get super touchy about touching their own side. Oh my God, the tribalists will be so mad. The cultists will be so mad. And Marjorie Taylor Greene at this late date is still scared of her own tribalists and her cultists, right? So let's keep it real on that. Anna's right about that. Now, having said that, guys, given how immovable the Republican Party has been my whole life, when I am seeing some portion of MAGA at least begin to be honest about war, about Iran, about Israel, about the lobbyists, about the donor class, that is a movement that I did not expect a couple of years back, and that didn't exist a couple of years back. And so why is she still kissing Trump's ass? Because Trump is still daddy in those circles, of course, right? But also they're having a fight over Trump, and they know what a child he is. So what I mean by that, guys, is Mark Levin, anytime that, like for when Trump bombs Iran, Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and go, that's it, we're the true MAGA, we're the true MAGA. True MAGA says Israel first and second and third and 18th and then America, right? And so Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson throughout that conversation keep going to pains to say, that's absurd. Mark Levin and Shapiro aren't America first, they're not true MAGA. Neither is Laura Loomer. She's not against the neocons, she is a neocon, right? So they're calling those things out, but they're battling over the turf of Trump's ego. Because if they make the mistake of attacking Trump, Trump will be like, oh yeah, that's it. I'm going with Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro. You hurt my feelings. They know they're dealing with a child, let's keep it real. But Marjorie still loves him. Tucker never liked him, okay? But you could tell when Marjorie talks, she's like, Trump is the greatest. I can't believe anybody criticizes him. And it's like, all right. You sound like one of the Biden ass kissers, to be honest, when you get into your love fest with Trump.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the freak out over Zohran Mamdani, and it's coming from his own party, because of course it is. So we'll get into those details and more when we come back.
All right, so you got a message for John Idarola?
Tell him to be nice to me. Be nice to me.
Let's go to Super Chat. Tony Huppel writes in, going back to the big but ugly bill and the deficit, so is the US going to declare bankruptcy like Trump did 6 times? How would that even work? Trump has actually said that before in his first term. He's like, he hinted at, well, why don't we just declare bankruptcy? No, you knucklehead, that's not how it works. If the US declares bankruptcy, it will be an economic calamity. Like the dollar will crash, the economy will crash, everything will crash. We'll lose tens of millions of jobs. So that it's just unthinkable, and that's the direction they're going. Romulus 463 writes in a number of times, kind of amuses me. He says, in 62 years, I have an impressive track record of being wrong on issues. I once even agreed with Cenk on guns until I read the history of how tyrants disarm, then kill, and then there are times when people took up arms against tyrants. So interesting call out of me, okay? But I like it, I'm amused by it. He continues in another super chat, I'm so Second Amendment. I believe the Gazans have the right to own the means of self-defense. Gun rights are human rights. Self-defense is the first law of nature. Well, that is a super interesting point. And you know what, brother, because of you, and notice I didn't catch feelings of your criticism. Okay, because of you, in fact, I'll give you credit. I might do a tweet later about, yeah, wait a minute, that is a good question. Do the Second Amendment guys think that the Gazans should have guns? Okay, and then one last one, Romulus writes in again, newsflash, all governments do terrible things, government is force. Unless it's the Israeli government, that it is the most holy government of all time. Okay, anyway, Tyler Petra, he didn't write that. Tyler Petra writes in, Gaza's a mess and we're just standing by.
No, we're doing worse than that. We are aiding and abetting. We are on the side of the Nazis. I want you to, and I mean that, but in every sense of the word. People get real upset about it. I mean, what else do you call this? The wanton slaughter of innocent people, the announcement of the slaughter of innocent people, the intention to slaughter innocent people. We're on their side, we're giving them the weapons to do it.
Yeah, it'd be like if we not only didn't fight the Germans, but we paid for the camps. I mean, Israel kills 80 to 100 innocent civilians every day in Gaza. And we just gave them another $500 million to kill more innocent civilians. And they brag about how they're starving them to the point of desperation so they could ethnically cleanse them.
It's absolutely disgraceful.
So, I mean, you could complain all you want. I don't care. I'm not talking to Tyler. I'm talking to Israelis. Are there even any dead enders left that are Israeli supporters? Like, other than the propagandists, I don't think there's almost anyone left. Anyway, to finish Tyler's point, he said, our names will be in some museum one day, listed as citizens of countries that did nothing. I'll tell you one quick thing, Tyler. I watched Brave New Films, Gaza Journalists Under Fire. You should check that out, bravenewfilms.org. And what was a beautiful moment was both Armenians and Jews came up to me afterwards and said, keep fighting to make sure that we end this genocide. I love those guys. Back on TYT, Jen Gadana with you guys. I'll read one YouTube member comment here because I rather enjoyed it. Carl Stillwell, FDR to the US wealthiest. I welcome your hatred. Today's Democratic establishment, I welcome your donations.
Yeah, totally.
It's a perfect way of putting it, Carl. All right, Casper.
Well, the freak out over NYC mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani continues, this time from members of his own party.
What specifically has Mamdani said that you think is anti-Semitic?
Pro-Hamas. Hamas is a dangerous terrorist organization that should be destroyed. To lift them up and praise them, I think that's a clear indicator that something is wrong with that. But he has to
when did he praise Hamas? I don't recall him ever praising Hamas.
Well, that's because he never did praise Hamas, and current New York City Mayor Eric Adams smeared him, lied about him, defamed him, and it's pretty much in line with what Mamdani has experienced from other Democrats, members of his own party. Now, the New York City mayoral candidate, Mamdani, is really making waves because of the fact that he is a self-described democratic socialist. He's also Muslim, and if he does win in the general election, he would be the first Muslim mayor of New York City. And so a bunch of gross people, including Democrats, can't help themselves by sharing just how gross and anti-Semitic they happen to be. I'm sorry, Islamophobic they happen to be. So with that in mind, why don't we go to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who just can't get himself to endorse Mamdani, and he's gonna explain why. Take a look.
Globalizing the Intifada, by way of example, is not an acceptable phrase, and he's gonna have to clarify his position on that as he moves forward. With respect to the Jewish communities that I represent, I think our nominee is going to have to convince folks that he is prepared to aggressively address the rise in anti-Semitism in the city of New York, which has been an unacceptable development. And any mayor, whether you're a Democratic mayor, Republican mayor, an independent mayor, has got to commit to the safety and well-being of all of the people of the city of New York.
Now, this whole globalized intifada debacle isn't because Zohran Mamdani is going around saying globalize intifada. That is a myth. This all stemmed from an interview he did this month, in fact, on The Bulwark. These are a bunch of never Trump Republicans who clearly are not fans of his. And he was asked about the phrase globalize the intifada. He described it as a symbolic call for Palestinian human rights, not for violence or anti-Semitism. So in other words, even though he didn't say it, The Bulwark was trying to get him to condemn that phrase, and he didn't condemn it, he explained what it was, and that's what's led to this whole debacle. By the way, the definition of the term intifada, which was published by Dropsite News, is as follows. Arabic for uprising or shaking off has historically referred to a wide spectrum of resistance. The first intifada between 1987 to 1993 was driven by mass boycotts, general strikes, student protests, and civil disobedience. It was largely nonviolent in its early stages. Many supporters of the slogan say globalize the intifada draws from that legacy, a call for international solidarity through protest, divestment, and organized resistance to apartheid, occupation, and genocide, not violence. But there is ongoing opposition to that perspective. As The Hill reports, many pro-Israel activists and many Jewish people view the phrase as calling for violence against Jews, referencing the first and second intifadas that took place in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s, during which Palestinians in both Palestinian territories and Israel engaged in uprising in which significant violence occurred, and many on both sides were killed. So, look, there have been cases of violence, including, cafe bombings and things like that. I don't want to minimize that, but at the same time, the lies about how Zohran Mamdani is going around saying globalize intifada is driving me crazy, because that's not what he's saying.
Yeah, he never said it. So a couple of things. So first, The Bulwark is anti-Trump neocons.
Yes.
And a lot of people have bought into, well, as long as they're anti-Trump. No, neocons want endless wars in the Middle East. They wanted a further war in Iran. Please care about policy. Like, it's so easy to trick people these days, just being pro or anti-Trump, right? Oh, I am anti-Trump. That is why we should do tax cuts for the rich. Wait, what? I am anti-Trump. That's why we should go to war in Iran on behalf of Israel. Wait, what? No, care about policy, right? So now, when you get to this is 100% propaganda, because they're saying, I'm not just gonna criticize him for something he said, I'm gonna criticize him for something he didn't say. And do you think people get that? No. Right now, if you ask the average American that listened to any of this coverage, they would all think that he actually said globalize the intifada, because they're all asking him about it as if he said it, right? And so this is the same trick that mainstream media did with Iraq and 9/11. They would keep using Iraq and 9/11 in the same sentence, and then they would later say, well, I didn't say they did 9/11. I said they came from the same general vicinity as the people who did 9/11.
Right.
It was meant to trick you into thinking Iraq did 9/11. This is meant to trick you into thinking that Mamdani is a terrorist supporter, right? And so they say intifada can only mean violence. Well, actually, the people who use it sometimes mean that, and a lot of times they don't mean that. They mean an uprising politically, diplomatically, etc. But whenever they say a political uprising, you yell at them and call them terrorists. So there's no winning. There's no winning. You can't oppose Israel in any way, shape, or form. And even if you do, and you've used all the right words, they're gonna blame you for words you didn't use, because they're the bottom of the barrel. And everyone who's engaging in this is doing it to try to smear Mamdani on behalf of Israel.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with humanitarian or anti-Semitism or bigotry. Well, if they were worried about that, then how come they never asked about the words Greater Israel, Eretz Israel, Judea and Samaria? These are all words that people use when they're saying Israel should wipe out Muslims and take their land. Those words are 10,000 times worse, because they're doing it. It's not theoretical. They're actually wiping out Muslims and actually taking their land. But words that are used, and Netanyahu literally said from the river to the sea, we're gonna have all of it, right? But the mainstream media in America never once asked anyone, did you use that word? Do you condemn those words? Because being genocidal in favor of Israel, perfectly acceptable. But like thinking that Palestinians might be human. Oh, how dare you? So they're all gonna smear you. And notice, it's not just Republicans. It's mainly Democrats that are smearing.
I want to go to the photo of Mamdani and his wife to show you just how extremist they are. These are the extremists that, corporate Democrats, Republicans are trying to fearmonger about. Extremists usually don't have wives who dress as modern as his wife does in that photo. Obviously, he is not an extremist at all, but there's an effort to paint him as an extremist because he has been critical of Israel's genocide in Gaza, and more importantly, because of his economic policies. Make no mistake about it, the reason why corporate media is doing a terrible job in covering him and essentially allowing, smear merchants like Eric Adams to run their mouths is because they hate the economic policies that Mamdani champions. That's what this is really about. And I want to talk a little more about Islamophobia, and in fact, call out someone that I have the displeasure of hosting a show with. Her name's Lindy Lee. So I want to go to that video next because on her take last Friday, here's what she had to say about Mamdani. Let's take a look.
I am absolutely stunned that the city that is famous for being terrorized by Islamic terrorists is on the cusp of electing Islamic extremists who is chanting globalized intifada as its mayor. That for me is just jaw-dropping. This is 24 years after 9/11.
I'm just curious, is there a day you wake up where you don't see terrorism everywhere? Because you literally just implied that this guy's a terrorist, and I found that bigoted, Islamophobic, and absolutely disgusting. If you don't like his policies, I can understand that, and we can have a discussion about those policies. But it seems like you just have a problem with the fact that he's Muslim. You have a problem with the fact that he looks a little different from other previous leaders. Don't interrupt me, I'm still speaking, I didn't interrupt you. Listen, the problem with that mayoral race is that the Democratic candidates who ran against him in the primary offered nothing. They offered nothing but the status quo. By the way, the progressive who ran in the primary has decided to endorse Mamdani and happens to be a Jewish American. So these allegations that Mamdani is like some Muslim extremist who hates Jews is utterly ridiculous. And by the way, Cenk, I noticed that Lindy Lee changed her tone a little bit when it comes to Mamdani when you were debating her on Piers Morgan's show today. Let's take a quick look at that.
Cenk, I just want to say my opposition to him has nothing at all to do with Israel or his faith. It's nothing. It's to do with his Marxist ideology. And I have to say, I feel sick to my stomach because of it. I was born in an authoritarian communist regime that murdered my great grandfather in cold blood. So anything that reeks of communism just sends shivers down my spine.
I have yet to host any show with Lindy Lee where she doesn't bring up her personal experiences and what happened to her grandparents at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. But nonetheless, she's ignorant, she's Islamophobic, and I find her embarrassing. Cenk, back to you.
Okay, so when I was on Piers, she also then went back to, mentioning his Muslim background. Rudy Giuliani was vicious about his Muslim background. And they just keep saying things that aren't true, that he said globalized intifada or that he supports Hamas. They're just smearing him because he's Muslim, period. You have issues with his economic policies, that's totally worthy of a debate. There's no problem with that at all. Okay, stick to economics. Let's have a real discussion and a debate about whether we should do, government-run grocery stores or rent control, etc. That's the most legitimate thing in the world. Just going after him, and the thing that bothers me, and by the way, I tore into Rudy after he said all those anti-Muslim things. And he came back, he was the one-on-one guest. He came back for the panel just to say like, what happened? I thought we were friends. I'm like, no, brother, wrong again, Bob. No, if we agree on an issue, great. When we disagree on an issue, I'm gonna take your head off. Okay, and so that's how it works. This you don't get to say those terrible things and get away with it, 100%. Right? And so they can't help themselves. And the great irony, guys, is that they're like, we're so worried about bigotry against Jews. So under the guise of anti-Semitism, fighting anti-Semitism, they're like, that's why we have to be bigoted towards Muslim. Like
insane.
what? Okay,
Insane.
no, you don't. You don't have to assume that every Muslim agrees with 9/11 or wants the Statue of Liberty to wear a burqa or is going to pass Sharia law in Manhattan. Okay, that's insanity. He's just a normal person that happens to be Muslim and socialist, which is a different thing.
Yeah. All right, we got to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk about how young conservatives feel about the ongoing genocide taking place in the Middle East. How do they feel about Israel compared to older conservatives? And later in the show, we are going to interview Alex Thompson. He is the co-author of Original Sin. It's about the cover-up of Biden's mental decline. If you're not a member, don't worry. That'll be a conversation during our bonus episode that's open to the public. We're gonna take a quick break and come right back.
So I'm going to read some criticism of me in a second. So I'll read Sam92240 first on Twitch. Cenk did an excellent job on Pierce today. Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. All right, now let's go to the criticism. Dirge writes in on TYT.com. Cenk, I'm interested to hear your analysis about your interviews last Friday. I would guess you see it as more evidence of MAGA splintering, but I'm far more cynical. Your guest had some quibbles with Trump around immigration and bombing Iran, but still moved their red lines. They didn't seem to have a problem with Trump blowing out the debt, stripping rights or ignoring the judiciary. One even praised the tariffs. Ask John how many game companies they killed. They are not turning on Trump. They still like him. They would vote for him again. By the time they turn, if ever, it'll be too late. It might already be too late. SCOTUS injunction ruling means Trump can interfere with the elections and every state will have to fight it. So guys, no. The part of the reason I want to read that, Dirge, is because, no, I'm not showing it as evidence of anything. I want you guys to actually hear different sides, okay? And so they had different points of view. I interviewed two different right-wing podcasters, and some of them agreed and disagreed with Trump on different things. And no, I'm not under any magical thinking that they're all going to turn around in 6 months or even 4 years and go, that's it, I'm done with Trump. And all of you vote against him, vote for Dukakis, right? No, guys, have realistic expectations. So what are the realistic expectations? That if, for example, I asked them what their red lines were, and they said boots on the ground, okay, regime change. So now, okay, if they move on that, and they say, okay, then they were hypocrites and they were useless, et cetera, et cetera. But if and Israel is constantly pushing for regime change, what is Trump going to do? Does he look at the polling? Does he look at what other MAGA hosts are saying? Definitely. Does he always go with the polling? No. Does he always go with MAGA hosts? No. But does he take that into consideration? If we move enough of them, will he take that into account? We already have seen him take that into account on several occasions, including when he suggested boots on the ground in Gaza, and everybody was like, no, and then he went back on it in 24 hours. So realistic expectations, and whether it's they flip or don't flip. And by the way, the first guy, Dan Holloway, said, oh no, there's still tons of cultists here who'll agree with anything Trump says, right? I want you to see how they're thinking, what they're thinking, and don't just make blanket assumptions. It doesn't mean that they're angels, and it doesn't mean that they agree with us on most things. If you get a couple of agreements and they make a difference, amazing. If you don't, at least you tried. And most importantly, at least you heard things and understand it better. Cray Souffle writes in, take the win, right, Cenk? F that. Greene and Carlson are two horrible human beings. Even if they both were to make a donation to the March of Dimes or Habitat for Humanity, they're still not gonna change their party affiliation or vote Democrat and will continue to remain horrible human beings. But Cray Souffle, that's not the argument, brother. And I'm glad that you guys are asking these questions. Nobody thinks Marjorie Taylor Greene is gonna vote against Trump or Tucker Carlson is gonna vote against the next Trump. Nobody thinks that. No, what we're looking for is an alliance on specific issues. So I would ask you back, when they say, hey, let's stop funding Israel, let's not go to war with Iran, should I say to them, you're a horrible human being. I don't believe you. I don't want your help. I don't want you to tell Trump to not attack Iran. How would that help? Why don't I take the win on that issue where they're on our side and then fight them on all the other issues? Just because you say, hey, look, they agree with us on one thing doesn't mean they're angels. I hope that is clear enough. All right, we'll be back. Cenk, Anna, and Selçuk İpek. Selçuk, thank you for joining. Sağ ol abi. He hit the join button below. You could also do it at tyt.com. Anna.
All right, let's get to our next story. You just got a little taste of some of the viral memes that have been spreading all over social media featuring young conservatives who are not at all in favor of US support for Israel. In fact, there is a generational divide among conservatives when it comes to the genocide in Gaza, with younger self-identified Republicans questioning US support toward Israel. So in March, for instance, the Pew Research Center found that Republicans and Republican-leaning independents have become increasingly negative toward Israel, especially compared to 2022. And most of the shift actually came from Republicans under the age of 50. In 2022, 63% of Republicans under 50 had a positive view of Israel, and now they are roughly split, with 48% positive and 50% negative. Now, for this piece, the Washington Post actually spoke to specific college Republicans to get their view on Israel and what's going on. They spoke to a 20-year-old by the name of Josiah Newman, who's part of his college Republicans leadership at Xavier University. He grew up in a very Christian household that was very much supportive of Israel. He took a trip to Jerusalem a decade ago that solidified his belief that Israel was the land of God's chosen people. But he began to see things a little differently as, the Israeli government started carrying out its genocide in Gaza. He told the Washington Post, quote, "We give Israel $3.8 billion a year. Looking at our own issues that we have, even in Buffalo, the crime that we have here, the fentanyl epidemic, I don't think they're addressed nearly as well. To be America first, the stars and stripes must come before the Star of David," he says. Now, he said that he now has parents who at first were not open to seeing critical content about Israel, but all of a sudden they are open to it. So not only is this having an impact on young conservatives, but these young conservatives are also having these conversations with their parents, and that could make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, on Piers Morning this morning, there was a discussion about how tons of young Jewish voters in New York voted for Mamdani. And there's this huge generational divide, not just in the Republican Party, but among Jewish Americans overall, right? So these are two different categories, right? And younger Jewish Americans are going, I didn't sign up for a genocide. This has got nothing to do with me, and I don't want anything to do with it, right? I'm against it. And older Jewish Americans, these are stereotypes, by the way. There's wonderful older Jewish Americans who are 100% against this. In fact, you should watch the movie Gaza Journalists Under Fire by Brave New Films, where there's Holocaust survivors going, no, stop, what are you doing, right? But yes, a lot of younger Americans are leaving this blind support for Israel behind, partly because of the media that they're consuming. We were all brainwashed by mainstream media to love Israel and honestly to hate all Muslims. And Muslims were no good terrorists who were bothering Israel. And the Muslims were no good terrorists attacking Israel. The Muslims had to be wiped out. The Muslims were dark and violent and savage because beautiful Israel needed their protection from them, right? And so, but now this is why Israel tried so hard to ban TikTok, and there's many politicians on the record talking about it, because it wasn't China. The problem was with TikTok wasn't China, it was Israel, because you were seeing Israel slaughtering kids day in and day out, and it's turned people against Israel en masse, which it should. Imagine if you saw any genocide, the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, anything. If you saw it day by day as they killed kid after kid after kid, of course you turn against them, right?
Right. In fact, the Washington Post also spoke to a junior at Miami University who chairs the College Republicans Club. His name is Andrew Belcher, and he talked a little bit about where he gets his news. And so since he gets his news from Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh, a little bit, not a little bit, but that's a little bit discouraging. Let's just put it that way. But I guess the silver lining here is the fact that we're talking about two individuals who are very, very critical of Israel, right?
Oh wait, I thought that there were nobody on the right or nobody who voted for Trump who were critical of Israel.
Let's please not get into that, please.
And
Okay.
I heard it was never going to affect the voters. Oh, that's
okay.
interesting.
So with Matt Walsh, he doesn't really care about the Palestinian people at all. He just doesn't want to spend any of our resources in supporting Israel. Joe Rogan actually has been good on the issue for a long time. Especially beginning with his interview with Abby Martin some years ago. He does care about the plight of the Palestinian people, so I want to give Joe Rogan a lot of credit for that. But these are the podcasters that young conservatives are listening to, and they're clearly having an impact. So the breakthrough here is that corporate media no longer has the stranglehold on the narrative that they once had.
Yeah, look, our question on the live chat, shows live 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day. Will these young conservatives turn on Trump because of this? I think that really needs a depends. Wow, look at you, 50% saying yes. So what it depends on is, if he did what he just did, he bombs Iran and then gets out and demands a ceasefire and stops Israel from bombing, well, then they're less likely to turn on him, right? But if he said boots on the ground, we're going into Iran for Israel, then yes, a lot of young conservatives would turn on Trump. I know, nobody on the left will believe it. Okay, but here they are. They're saying it, the polling is showing it, etc.
All right, let's move on to our final story of the day. This one is, it really befuddles me, especially when you're concerned about criminality among the undocumented population. Let's watch.
We're here today to announce a major update in an important case. Abrego García has landed in the United States to face justice. On May 21st, a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee returned a sealed indictment charging Abrego García with alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling in violation of Title 8 USC 1324.
Well, now that Kilmar Abrego García has been returned to the United States, Trump's Department of Justice has filed charges against him, accusing him of human smuggling. Now, what's fascinating about this story is that the star witness for Abrego Garcia's trial is a 3-time felon who received a sweetheart deal as long as he testifies against Abrego García. I'm not kidding. So get a load of this. This 3-time felon, his name is Jose Ramon Hernandez Reyes, was released from detention into a halfway house in exchange for his cooperation in this federal prosecution of Abrego García. He'll be permitted to remain in the United States for at least a year as long as he cooperates with this trial. So remember, Abrego García was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. It was an administrative error, as Trump administration lawyers admitted in court filings. They're apparently so embarrassed by their mistake that they're now like on a witch hunt to find Abrego García guilty of human smuggling. And in order to do so, they are essentially releasing a human smuggler and someone who has drunkenly shot into a neighborhood, releasing him out into the public just so they can catch Abrego García committing a crime.
See, this is a perfect example of Donald Trump's ego, right? Because he's got to be right about Abrego García. So if he actually cared about the issues, and if you're right wing or you're MAGA, or you voted for Trump in any way, you should be furious about this. Because what do you want? You don't want undocumented criminals in the country, right? Not only is he a 3-time felon, he's crossed the border 6 times already. Okay, and since he has felonies on his record, last time he got a huge prison sentence, the one that he was about to finish and that he got released from because he crossed the border illegally while being a felon here in America, right? So
he's been caught for smuggling. I'm talking about the star witness who's gonna testify against Abrego García. He's actually been caught and convicted of doing things including smuggling migrants, so human smuggling, what they're trying to catch Abrego García on, re-entering the country illegally after deportation, as Cenk mentioned, and drunkenly discharging a firearm in a residential neighborhood with a person being as close as 50 feet from him as he's shooting the weapon.
Yeah, 2 things about that. He has 2 different weapons charges from 2 different incidents, including the firing into the crowd that Anna's talking about. If what he's saying is true, which is a giant if, because he's saying this to get out of jail and to stay in America, He is the boss of Abrego García in that transportation scheme.
It's crazy. This is
so why would you let him out? That doesn't make any sense. But Donald Trump can't be wrong. His ego has to be satiated. So you're releasing an actually dangerous undocumented immigrant inside the country to try to smear Abrego García.
It's so absurd. I got to read this comment. This is from Sean Hecker. Sean Hecker is the criminal defense attorney for Kilmar Abrego García. By the way, let me just say this. You want to charge and try Garcia for these allegations? I'm fine with that. I have no problem as long as there's a system of due process that is respected and they follow through on that system of due process. So if he did get caught or the jury finds that he did commit some sort of crime here, this is how the process is supposed to work, okay? But the idea that you just release someone who actually was engaged in human smuggling in addition to other crimes, so that person can be the star witness to catch Abrego García kind of defeats the whole purpose of catching the dangerous undocumented criminals, right? Anyway, so the lawyer who represents Kilmar Abrego García says the extraordinary lengths to which the government has gone to pursue this flimsy case against our client speaks volumes. They'd rather keep genuinely dangerous, deportable people on the streets than admit a simple mistake. And I think the defense attorney there is absolutely spot on with what he's saying.
So to me, this one's a litmus test for the right-wing hosts. So if you're independent or a right-winger out there, see if any of the right-wing hosts talk about this case. My guess is that none of them will. Because it's embarrassing to them. Because if you actually care about undocumented criminals who are being released in the country, you would be 100% against this action, right? So they're probably gonna hide it from you. That's why people don't know a lot of the hypocrisy that goes on in the right wing or in Republican circles or with Trump, because the shows they watch never talk about it.
Exactly.
Whereas we call out all sides for both discredit and credit when they deserve it. All right, speaking of which, Alex Thompson wrote the book Original Sin about the Joe Biden cover-up. He's up next.
Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur with you. Now, joining us is national political correspondent for Axios, Alex Thompson, who co-authored Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. It's the book that he co-authored with Jake Tapper. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Long-time viewer, first time, I guess, I don't know, like not caller, but whatever this is.
Thank you so much. So first of all, let me just commend you for doing the type of reporting that most journalists were unwilling to do. You were one of the few who was calling out the real issues with the Biden administration and his mental decline before anyone else was willing to do it. But you also rightly criticized the mainstream media for missing the Biden mental decline story entirely. And I have to ask you, one of those people was Jake Tapper, right? Of course, that infamous moment with Laura Trump where he denied that Biden had mental decline, said that he just had a stutter. Why did you decide to co-author this book with him?
I just really disagree with that. The Jake Tapper clip that you're referencing was in 2020. The Joe Biden 2020 was not the same Joe Biden as 2023. I'd also say the reason I decided to do this with Jake is because this book was his idea. He was the one that approached me and said, I think there's more to the story beyond what we saw at this debate. And, basically exactly a year ago now. And I also, there are many, to your point, there are many journalists in Washington, D.C. that I would have said no to about doing a book on this topic. Jake Tapper is not one of them. Jake has said that he feels he fell short on this part of the Biden story. But whenever you're on sort of a beat, the reporters that are tough, the ones that are go soft. Jake was never one of those when it came to Biden. I think you can look at his coverage of the Afghanistan withdrawal and many other topics. I also, as I was, covering Biden pretty tough, not just in the H stuff, but on other things, not in an unfair way, but just an adversarial, regular way. Jake was one of my foremost, advocates within CNN. So it never really was a second thought in my mind.
That's fair. And, to be fair to Jake Tapper, he was very apologetic and remorseful of that, moment with Laura Trump and says that he apologized to her, but to follow up on that question, what is your sense of what transpired with mainstream media and their unwillingness to cover Biden's mental decline? Do you think that they were just in the dark and they didn't want to scratch beneath the surface? Do you think that there is maybe a partisan divide in the media that caused them to avoid covering the story? I'm curious what your read of it is.
A great question. And, the thing is that the mainstream media is not a monolith. So indulge me, because I'm going to say there's a few different factors at play. One is I do think that people let their ideological leanings affect their reporting of Joe Biden. They were, anti-Trump or, pro sort of like big D Democrat. But I think that actually makes the story too simplistic. I also think in Washington, D.C., I'm sure I know you've been here several times. It's a company town, and it's also a very liberal town, and also a very big D Democrat way. And there is not if you are a tough Trump reporter in Washington, D.C., you are invited to every single ambassador residence party in town. You are heralded around town. There's not the same social reward for covering, and covering, Joe Biden stuff. Or honestly, I know you have your issues with him, but the way that Jake Tapper also covered Obama in a lot of ways during his presidency, and I do think that also affected the reporting, and that. People, and I also think it affected the reporting. I know you guys have talked about this in the past. I think it in some ways affected the mainstream, for lack of a better term, the mainstream media's reporting on Bernie Sanders as well.
Yeah, so Alex, let's keep it real, okay? So I think mainstream media are the thugs who are the enforcers of the establishment. And so it's not about liberal or conservative or even Republican or Democrat. On my lifetime, mainstream media has loved establishment Republicans and Democrats, anyone who's in favor of the status quo, anyone who's in favor of corporations, and anyone who's an outsider is treated with enormous disdain, whether they're on the left or the right. And so that's why when people challenged Biden's competency, and it wasn't just right-wingers, we did it. We started a petition back in 2023, not 24, 23, and thousands of Young Turks members and audience members signed it. I had a protest candidate run against him. Marianne Williamson, you guys just treat like as she's dirt. She was right all along. Dean Phillips was viciously attacked by mainstream media, and he was a US congressman and right all along. Do you guys not see that you guys are the enforcers of the establishment and smear any outsider that challenges the status quo?
I mean, I don't see myself in that way, and
No, I'm not saying you, Alex. Hold on, let me be clear, because
am I part of the mainstream media or not?
No, so let me be clear. So we gave you credit before you wrote the book, okay? Because you were the exception to the rule, right? I'm asking you about the rule.
Do I think some people in the mainstream media are too close to like people in power? Absolutely. Do I think that Dean Phillips's candidacy was covered accurately or sufficiently? Absolutely not. I mean, I don't even believe that MSNBC had him on their network until it was clear that he absolutely was not going to win. At the end of the day, though, I also think that, at the end of the day, the people that lied about this were the people in the Biden administration.
Right.
And I don't think so, Alex. I disagree with you guys. So I get it. The Biden administration lied about it. I'm not disputing that part, right? But really, no reporter other than you could see that he was super old and couldn't finish sentences and was shaking hands with invisible people on stage? No one could see that? Then shouldn't they all be fired? Aren't they deeply incompetent at a bare minimum? Because Alex, the reason why I asked that is because they're not deeply incompetent. Their job is to protect the status quo. So if anyone challenges someone like Biden, it's the job of cable news anchors, and by the way, New York Times and Washington Post writers, to look down their nose at him and go, how dare you?
Okay.
Wait, hold on, no, I want him to answer that question. Do you not see that? Because the whole rest of the country sees that.
I just want to add to your question because, look, Alex, you stand out, right? Like you stand out as novel in this whole situation because you were willing to report something that the whole of mainstream media kind of turned a blind eye to. And that's an indictment of our journalism here in the United States, that you have one person who really shines or stands out for his willingness to not just take the party line as truth, but to actually dig in and see what the reality is.
Which question should I take?
So take the one, are they all incompetent? Or do they, like I'm asking, like, do they don't acknowledge it at all, right? Like they find me to be outrageous and radical for saying that they're ass kissers of the powerful, right?
I mean, listen, like I made a speech when I won an award at the White House Correspondents' Dinner earlier this year for my reporting on this topic. And I went up there and I said, because it felt weird to win an award from Washington, DC reporters for something that I thought was sort of a collective media, if you want to call it failure or letdown, whatever. And most of the reaction I've heard from that speech since was defensiveness. So, I agree with you. That being said, I do think there is a distinction we should point out here, which is there is a difference between covering the fact that, like, yes, Joe Biden was like shaking hands with people that weren't there. He was talking about members of Congress who had died, 3 weeks before. He was having trouble articulating his thoughts and walking, quite literally. And those things, while they maybe have been underplayed by the media, those were showed by the media. Also, the media did talk about his age regularly as a political liability. Now, what the media did not do at large, and there are exceptions to this besides myself, but then what the media at large did not do was look at how the fact that he was how his age was affecting his ability to do his job. And the fact that like he was clearly, including by the people around him, was not necessarily capable of doing the job till January of 2029, which is what he was asking voters to do. And I think the lack of investigative work, and also to your point, the lack of acknowledging they didn't do that investigative work is a media failure.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about those who are actually engaged in the cover up within the Trump administration. I'm sorry, the Biden administration, Freudian slip, because I see it as two separate camps, right? I think that there were some Democrats in the party, whether they be in Congress or some other government agency, who legitimately were in the dark, did not know what was going on. But those closest to the Biden administration obviously clearly knew what was going on. And you kind of get into that in the book. So name some names, because obviously people like Jill Biden stand out. Her top aide, Bernal, stands out. Talk about what they were doing in order to engage in this cover up.
As Joe Biden's decline became worse and worse, and there were clear signs of it as far back. I mean, you all covered it during the 2020 Democratic primary. The Joe Biden of 2019 was not the same as Joe Biden of 2015. That also, the Joe Biden of 2023 was much worse than the Joe Biden of 2019. And as Joe Biden's decline became more significant, the circle of advisors closed in around him and restricted access more and more. We had a senior White House official confess to us that essentially as the decline became worse, especially in the late 2023, that the people around him kept everyone else at bay in order to hide the extent of the decline. So you want names. So yes, you mentioned Anthony Bernal, Jill Biden's top aide, Annie Tomasini, who was one of the top aides to Joe Biden, but also is in some ways a Bernal deputy, Ashley Williams. All these people have been called to testify before the House Oversight Committee. You also have Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donnellan, Bruce Reed. Those are the people that have been around Biden for the longest, had tons of access to him. And the thing that's really striking is how much power so few people had within this White House, and how few people actually had regular access in a way that really is extraordinary. And they would always say like, oh, well, everyone always wants access to the president. No, the way the number of people that had access to Joe Biden was very, very small in comparison to most modern presidents.
Yeah. So look, this is why I get so frustrated with mainstream media, because if you dare challenge Dr. Jill Biden before the debate, you would have been smeared. You would have had a character assassination against you. How dare you? That is the first lady and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, she dragged her, husband who's in massive cognitive decline out on stage and said, go, do this, embarrass yourself. I don't care, I wanna stay in power. So look, two things come out of that, Alex. One, can we, I mean, they're never gonna do it. I don't know why I bother asking, but can mainstream media ever challenge the powerful? Or no. Dr. Jill Biden, right? I mean, she's borderline evil in what she did to Joe Biden. And let alone all those other advisors who did it for profit, because if Joe Biden was out of office, even if it's another Democrat, they're not in the White House anymore. They don't have power, they don't have profit, right? They were such egomaniacs. But also the entire Democratic leadership. Has anyone asked them, hey, you guys said Trump was a danger to democracy. That's why I did the petition, that's why I did the run, that's why I covered it so much. Because I actually believe that Trump is authoritarian in nature. So, but Alex, did they ever confess, any of those people, Jill Biden, through Jamie Harrison, through every Democratic leader, they were lying. They never thought Trump was a danger to democracy. They thought bowing their heads to Joe Biden was so much more important than beating Donald Trump.
Actually, I would just say, in some ways, it's the opposite of what you said, in that they do sincerely believe that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy, and they also believed in the same breath. And this is not necessarily Jill Biden, but some of the other people you were referencing, other aides, believe they would never change Joe Biden's mind. And if they ever did speak out, then it was only going to help Donald Trump. And if you believe Donald Trump's an existential threat to democracy, and even if it means putting in at times an old man in the Oval Office for 4 more years, it's still better than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
The threat of Donald Trump is what allowed them to rationalize what was actually sort of completely irrational.
Yeah, so they're like, oh, we have a madman running, so why don't we back the other madman, the guy who's lost his mind and has no chance of beating him? Yeah, I don't believe them. Well, I think they're traitors. I think that I mean, that's a heavy language. I don't mean it in like the right-wing way and they should be arrested or something. No, I don't mean that. But yeah, they didn't care about the country. They didn't care about the party. They were all egomaniacs who wanted to retain their power. But so, Alex, who was actually in charge of the country? Because obviously Joe Biden wasn't. Did Jill Biden run domestic policy and Anthony Blinken run foreign policy? And people have a legitimate right to ask, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, who actually runs the government? Donald Trump doesn't read, right? He can't read past the page. He watches Fox News all day. Joe Biden didn't even have a brain left. Who runs the goddamn country?
I mean, cabinet members, given that Joe Biden had extraordinary limitations to his energy. One member of the cabinet said, listen, he's an old man, 4 or 6 good hours a day. As a result, that means that a lot of the staff had much more power. Now, Jill Biden did not have like a very strong policy agenda when she was there. Like her role was more so, what does Joe want? And I'm going to be the enforcer. And yeah, I do also, according to people that has spent time with her and people in the White House, I think she also fell in love with the life. I don't think she was trying to enact a distinct policy agenda, though. Beyond that, Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan were clearly the two most powerful people in American foreign policy. When it came to American domestic policy, I would say Steve Ricchetti and Bruce Reed were certainly the most powerful people. And then when it came to Joe Biden's political agenda, I would say Mike Donilon first and foremost, and then a little bit below that would be communications guru, for lack of a better term, Anita Dunn.
Alex, I know you have a heart out, so I'll just end on this. What really stood out to me about your book was just how, I guess, retaliatory those in Biden's orbit were toward media that wanted to ask the right questions. And I remember a distinct moment, it's outlined in the book, where Kamala Harris even was shocked at the hard questions that she was being asked when she made an appearance on CNN. And final question for you, do you believe that maybe the lack of access to these politicians could be playing a role in journalists' decisions to kind of be hands off or maybe avoid digging a little deeper when they suspect that these politicians are lying to them?
Yes. I mean, like there's an access game in DC, and increasingly politicians, not just Joe Biden, Donald Trump, conservatives, liberals, are increasingly going to media outlets they think are going to be favorable or kinder or just nicer and give them softballs. And I think sometimes the access game in mainstream media does play a role. That being said, I want to also the reason why I'm here, and I think there's room for people like the Young Turks, people like on the right as well. I think that there's room for both here, but I also do really strongly believe, and it's why I still work at a place like Axios that had my back the entire way doing this Biden story, is because I still believe there is an important role for mainstream reporters. Doesn't mean we don't mess up. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't take accountability and be more accountable about our mistakes. But I do think there's room for both, and it's important to have both.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I only half agree. I agree if mainstream, I agree if mainstream media was actually trying to do objective journalism and actually challenge the powerful. But other than you and a couple of other guys, I see the exact opposite. I view them to be deeply counterproductive for the Praetorian Guard of the establishment and the status quo and corporate rule. So no, I don't have a lot of interest in mainstream media.
Cenk, mainstream media, they do There is investigative reporting that we literally cover and talk about on this show. We wouldn't be able to do our jobs without the actual journalists who go out in the field and they gather the news.
I know, Associated Press, Reuters, good text journalists, good journalists like Alex, etc. Cable news is a wasteland of propaganda for status quo. And New York Times and Washington Post, and yes, Axios Political oftentimes are terrible. All they do is the donor class is great. Oh, money in politics. I don't know it. What is that? Oh, gee, I wonder if AIPAC affects things. I wonder if big pharma affects legislation. I wonder if rich people taking money affects this bill that's going on. Of course they do. It's a show, Alex. It's theater. Anyways, but the book is good. And Alex was good in covering Biden before the book. The book is called Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Alex, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex.
I appreciate I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for the conversation. All right, guys, we're out of time. That's the show for today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.